we are.
There we are.
Here we are. It's been a few years.
It's been a while, yeah.
It has been. And that's the crazy thing where, you get all of the Pittsburgh is such a small city type people. And I guess in a lot of ways it is. But depending on what social circles you tend to interact with, which with me, it's way too many. It's actually kind of easy to not see somebody for a few years. And it's not like you're not doing anything. I'm not doing anything. We're both pretty productive people in our respective little corners of the music scene or scenes. I know that I make a bunch of different styles of music, or one kind of music that can be interpreted as a bunch of different styles. So therefore I never really fit into one bubble.
I can relate.
And I think that, that's the point I was getting at. Right? You, which by the way, Princess Nostalgia is in the building. Make some noise for the internet. I don't have the sound effects anymore, but people know what's up. So you are a singer, songwriter, producer, multi-instrumentalist, artist, visual, audio, all kinds of things. And human being here on planet Earth.
Maybe. Currently
in the geographical location of the Pittsburgh area. But you've been all sorts of places in the galaxy.
Very blessed to have, exactly.
Yes. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
For anybody that isn't familiar, why don't you do your little quick resume real quick, and we'll get into nerdy music talk.
Yeah. Well, the history of my family is primarily visual arts. 3 generations of women were artists and art teachers. And I feel like I was born on third base in that regard, because I was raised to kind of not really struggle with imposter syndrome in certain fields. I was raised to just view myself as an artist, like that was just my right since I came out of the womb practically. And my dad was a musician, so I got that from him. And around the age of 8, I started messing around with GarageBand, started playing the upright bass in the school orchestra. And ever since, I've just been spending a lot of time studying music production, especially.
Yeah, it's interesting. The time that you get into music production is pretty much right in line with when music production is becoming more and more accessible on like a consumer level, I suppose. Whenever I started making beats, I was in 8th grade at the time, but there was no GarageBand or Fruity Loops. I was making all of my beats on a Sony PlayStation with this little program that existed. And my friend was like, we went to Guitar Center and I saw like a Korg Electribe. I was like, the thing, that's like the PlayStation thing, but that's like in real life.
Yeah.
And then I was 16. I saved up my first 2 paychecks and bought a Korg Electribe ES1.
Wow. Yeah.
I still have it to this day. It doesn't work, but I still have it. I'll never get rid of that fucking thing.
Yeah, just a keepsake.
Yeah. But for you, you're growing up alongside the technology growing. So I find myself being very frustrated these days because like every time I get used to something, I get in my little bubble. And then I step out of the bubble for a second. It's like, oh, wait, I'm doing this outdated. Like it's constantly changing. So was that the same thing for you? Like you like learning stuff and then all of a sudden there's like another thing that exists and you're like, what the hell?
Absolutely.
Trying to keep up is crazy.
Yeah. Yep. I feel like, one thing I always say is that you have to master the most basic gear or the most basic techniques or concepts first before you can be ready to benefit from the next best thing. So, speaking of accessibility, I feel very blessed growing up with these tools that are at our disposal. And now I spend a lot of time trying to educate other aspiring producers to trust themselves and trust the process and to understand that it's not rocket science. And oftentimes the technical side is overemphasized and it's important, but the intuitive side is equally important. And just listening and trusting your gut basically and just tweaking with things, even if you don't understand why they work yet, you'll eventually get there. I mean, it took me a very long time because I didn't have a teacher. And so I spent a lot of time floundering, but I'm here now. But you're absolutely right. Like I look back at the songs that I was putting out the last time I came on your show and they sound so, on the one hand, they had this kind of eagerness and inventiveness to them that I lost to some degree as I got more specialized in different things. But in other ways, they sounded so much more flat because I didn't understand things like automation, like all these ways that you can
Sure.
give electronic sounds an organic feel and make them move around the stereo field. Like there's so many things that you can do. And then I got into sampling, and that has stepped up my game so much because, like, especially with drums, I was playing out all my rhythms on Drum Designer and Logic, or using different just the keyboard in Logic with different drum sounds, and they sounded so generic and flat, like no matter how many distortion plugins I threw on them, like but sampling drums, and then you could splice them up however you want, but it's like that has just completely changed the game for me. So but at the same time, I don't want to get too comfortable in what I'm doing now either. So yeah, it's a balance of mastering something that speaks to you without staying in that arena for too long, because
Yeah, listening to yourself as an artist is probably the hardest thing about being an artist. Like, screw all the technical mumbo jumbo stuff or the gear or the equipment. It's like listening to you and trusting what's in here is so tough because, like, at least for me in my artist life, I have the curse of self-doubt. So, and then you combine that with all of the technical resources that we have now, and it makes it really hard because, when I started making music, I didn't really know a whole lot about plugins and all of these things. And there wasn't a whole Waves wasn't a thing. There wasn't Isotope and all this crazy stuff. Right.
Yeah.
So I just got used to, like, does this sound right? Cool.
That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
Really.
But then I went down the mistake rabbit hole of starting to, like, unintentionally mix with my eyes and not with my ears, because you start seeing all of these plugins and you start seeing, like, this, like, borderline AI stuff that's telling you, like, all of your frequencies are wrong.
I tried one of those recently and it was a big mistake.
I'm like, what do you mean? Like, and then I've found, like, the flip has happened where I've, like, tried to, like, utilize all of this equipment and these resources to, like, give my mixes more life, and it somehow has seemed to have, like, killed it.
Yeah.
So I, like, try so hard nowadays to just be like minimal stuff. There's, like, endless resources, but like you were saying before, you don't really, like, need all of that stuff if you trust what you're doing.
Exactly.
And, like, doing it at the source, like,
yes,
kind of like the can't polish a turd type thing. Like, you can't polish Logic drum samples.
Exactly. It's all about finding the right raw sound to begin with.
Yeah, exactly.
I listened to an interview, I think it was in an interview, or maybe it was something I read about Missy Elliott and Timbaland's process, and how they would just spend hours scrolling through thousands of sounds until they found something that was just sitting in the right spot. And then you maybe compress it a little bit, maybe throw in some distortion, but, like, yeah, you can't polish a turd. That's absolutely it. And I think a lot of, music production can seem very intimidating to people who are beginners, because there's a lot of pretentious trash talk about how you need X, Y, and Z gadgets and how you need analog this and how blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, absolutely not.
No, I think
you just need to have good taste, honestly. I mean, that's subjective, but, like, and Rick Rubin talks about how you should be ruthless about removing everything that isn't truly serving a song.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's so easy, and that's another wormhole of, like, digital music production, where it's so easy to be like, what if we layered that? What if I stacked that? What if I, and all
That's
of a
what
sudden
I used to do.
Why does this project have fucking 78 tracks? I try to think, and it's hard, especially with electronic music, because, like, there are no rules. There's no rules to any music. But when I think about the music that I like the most, like, traditionally, it is just, like, very simple instrumentation. And it's like, sure, I'm not always working with, like, guitars, bass, drums, vocals, or things like that. But it's like, okay, there's, like, if I broke down this solo composition, if I was going to make humans or not humans play this, I would probably only need, like, 4 or 5 individuals. So if I have a composition I'm looking at and it's like, oh, I would need, like, a 15-piece band to play this, it's probably wrong. I got to scale it down and make it a little bit more just, like, transparent. It's like, also too, when you're, like, listening to something that you've done and you're hearing, like, all these, like, intricate melodies dancing with each other, it might make sense to you because you understand the language of that. But if you try to play it for somebody else, they're like, what is happening? There's, like, 18 conversations going on musically.
Yep. The
And
brain
I'm
needs
used
to
to
have a
having,
focal point. You need to give
yeah,
the listener a focal point. And if you're leaving all these different parts in your arrangement just because you're attached to them and you like them all individually, it kills the magic of all of them at once. Like you can't have your cake and eat it too, I would
sure,
say.
sure. Yeah, the analogy that I always kind of say, like I give myself when I'm writing music, it's just like you got to be able to like admit when like your child is ugly.
Yeah.
It's like, this is my thing and it's so precious. So it's like, hate to break it to you, buddy, but maybe not.
Uh-huh.
You know?
I've revisited some tracks that I wrote like 5 years ago, and it feels so good now that I'm not attached to them to just go in and gut them from the ground up. And it's so easy for me now that I've had a lot of distance from them to quickly assess what is actually valuable here, what is worth holding on to. And sometimes it'll turn into an entirely new song. But, that process of coming up with 100 different parts, that's all great. But it doesn't mean you have to keep them. You're working through all the different angles and possibilities within this sonic universe you've built. And then you have to decide which parts are actually key. And if that means
Totally.
taking space from it, then do it.
Yeah, time and space in music production, in art in general, is so important. And it's one of the things that I've noticed seems to be like obviously lacking in a lot of modern art, because we live in a society where everything's like, hey, you got to do something, you got to do it now, you got to release it, you got to strike while the iron's hot. And like, I don't know, I'm sure there's some people out there that can create art very quickly that is good and genuine to them and products that they're happy with, but I can't do that. If I'm making something, I'm throwing everything at the wall and then I have to step away from it. And how long that is can vary. It might be a day, it might be a month.
Yeah.
And then I got to go back and be able to listen to it with fresh ears, remove myself from that whole like the honeymoon phase of like a relationship. It's kind of like that with a song where it's like everything is great, but in time you start to find the things that maybe don't, like the things we need to work on if we're going to maintain this relationship in a long-term basis.
Yep. I never hate a song more than the day after I've released it, because then I listen to it and I'm like, I can't change this ever again. But it's a balance, right? Because on the one hand, you have artists who will sit without putting a song out for a decade. And then you have artists who will put out a song every day for a year. And I think finding a middle ground, and there's a time and place for each of those extremes. But because I was constantly putting stuff out when I was younger. And if I had held on to those things because they weren't perfect, I wouldn't be here today. And just because you put something out doesn't mean you can't still revisit it. People like to see that progression. I took down all of my songs off Spotify like 3 years ago, did a rebranding, knew that my production skills had improved to a degree that I wanted to revisit all those projects and re-release them down the line. So, it's it's important not to be too precious about things.
Definitely.
At the same time.
Definitely. I think it's, being a musician, an artist in any level, you have to have some sort of a healthy dose of ego to make it work.
Yeah.
But the ego can definitely like be kind of counterproductive if you let it infiltrate the wrong things in the wrong ways. And it's like, take the time with the art, but also release as much as you can if that's what you want to do. But also, like, if you feel like you need to take things down or change things or whatever, that's kind of a convenient thing about the digital age. And also just knowing that, like, if you release something and it wasn't great a few years ago, I'm sure there's very few people that are, like, remembering that in the way that you are.
Exactly.
Not to, like, it's just the reality of the way people interface with all art now.
It's liberating to know that nobody really gives a fuck what I'm doing.
Totally.
It's like, nobody's paying attention.
Yeah, I think like art, the interesting thing is that art functions best in like a temporary environment. And what I mean by that is like seeing like live music or seeing or hearing something in that moment where it fits the mood of that day. And it's great here. But like with social media and all of this like branding ourselves and being personalities, I feel like there's a part of our ego that is trying to convince us that every single thing that we do has to be like a masterpiece or has to be like something that's gonna change the culture. And it's like that's not how art should be made.
No.
You know, like for me, art and songs are like sandwiches. You know, it's like, this is a good sandwich, and I hope I can provide a good sandwich for everybody, and they're feeling well fed. Like, damn, that was a good ass sandwich.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to go about my day and do something else. And maybe they'll come back the next time they want another good sandwich.
Yeah. And that level of humility is, I think it's necessary for the creative process to not kill an artist.
Yeah.
Not kill an artist's soul, because yeah, I struggled with my ego for a long time. Like when I was younger, I had a fair share of entitlement and a chip on my shoulder and a need to prove myself as a producer. And I barely knew anything, but I viewed myself as a producer, and I'm grateful for that ego, because again, I probably would have given up if I didn't.
Oh, you absolutely
have
need
that.
it. You need it.
But now I've reached a point where the misery of feeling like the world owes you something is not worth it. And it's also when you realize that a lot of people don't get the chance to chase their dreams. That really changes things. Just the fact that I even get to try is more than enough. And the awareness that music is a story that is, any art form is a story that's much bigger than any individual. I'm just contributing like a tiny little piece to the puzzle, and we're all just mirroring ideas back at each other. So I don't feel like it's fair to claim ownership even of the stuff that I create. I mean, I'm sampling stuff that other producers have. It's just like, it's a constant remixing of stuff that's around us, and not feeling so, I don't want to say, I do feel connected to my art, but not feeling like it's a reflection of me and not viewing it personally has really liberated things for me and enabled me to kind of relax into myself and trust the process and know that I'm going to be fulfilled no matter what happens in my career.
Yeah. It's really, really important to realize that like what we do is so fucking weird. Like it's easy, especially for somebody in your position that like grew up in an artist household around other people that are just living like a counterculture lifestyle. It's like what we do is not normal. And just to be like, yeah, like I like made an album and released it, or like I made a painting and put it in a gallery or whatever. Like most people don't do that. We're a very like small percentage.
Yeah.
In our social circles, it's like, oh, everybody's creating art, everybody's making music. But if you step outside of that, it's like, wow, this is crazy. And that we're trying to do this is insane. And like, we may not reach like a certain threshold of like success or notoriety or fame, but like that's like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. And if all you're looking for is to like do that, there's much easier ways to do it than being an artist.
Yep.
But if like you genuinely care about the art, I think it's just being thankful that you like have the ability to do this and being thankful that like you have the know-how to like record a song and release it, and somebody in Europe can listen to the song. It's insane.
Absolutely. And I think that this kind of false icon that a lot of musicians worship, of fame and notoriety, it kind of feels like a conspiracy to keep us from actually getting our bread, because like we live in this age where a lot of people complain, due to streaming and due to people's short attention spans and all this stuff, artists aren't getting paid the way they used to. But on the other hand, we have this unprecedented opportunity to build our own business and reach our fans directly on the internet. Sell merch, people don't pay for to listen to our music anymore, but there's so many other ways to build out your business. And more artists than ever in history are turning down record deals, because like when you can reach your fans directly and market yourself directly on TikTok, on Instagram, and all these things, there's less of a need to outsource your entrepreneurial endeavors to a business that's going to take advantage of you ultimately.
Oh yeah.
So I feel like having reassessed my goals and kind of realized that I'm not waiting for somebody to discover me. I'm just slowly but surely building my own business and viewing this from the perspective of an entrepreneur. Like, I have utter faith that it's just going to keep growing as long as I keep nourishing it. And it doesn't have to be like an obscenely large fan base. It just has to be enough people that I can make a living off of it. And combined with music production, when you learn how to produce your own music, it means that you retain 100% ownership of your work. And it also means that you have a concrete engineering skill that you can make money off of as well. So I've started to view this in very practical terms, and maybe it's because I'm a Taurus, but like I feel very grounded in that, and I feel very empowered now that I recognize very clearly that fame is not my ultimate goal. It's simply to build my own business.
Yeah, I think that there's not like an endless amount of opportunities for artists to make it work. But I mean, like, I've been working, full time in the music industry, air quotes, in one way or another, for pretty much the past 15 years.
Mm.
And a lot of it had to do with just like dropping my ego and realizing that there are opportunities to do things in places that may not fit my brand, but still an opportunity, and it's better than keeping working at Starbucks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I think that if you can go out, meet people, drop the ego, try to like pivot, do some things. It's like, hey, like maybe this doesn't service my personal art at the moment, but it's an opportunity to meet people, to get experience doing things that are going to help me in the future. There's things that you can do. And like having all of those skills, being able to like produce stuff, being able to do like video editing, graphic design, all this stuff that I learned how to do as a teenager because I had zero friends. Now it's like I'm doing t-shirt designs for bands. I've made music videos for people. I've produced stuff for other people. I've done mastering work for other people. I've done like, I knew how to DJ. So I started like DJing a ton of events that are like, not 100% my thing, but hey, it's like, great, I'll go DJ something for a few hours if it's going to give me money to buy a fucking interface that I need or something. Like,
yep.
And it's all still part of the music scene. It's like, I'm DJing at these venues where it's like, oh, cool, I'm meeting the people that book here. I'm meeting the sound engineers, like all this stuff where it's, you get connected into that world.
Absolutely. All the time that we spend honing our own craft is something that we can then cash in on in countless different ways. And once I started viewing social media as a means of reaching my future clients and reaching my future fans, rather than a means of, getting the approval of my friends or, the type of...
That's a curse.
There's a darkness to social media, especially for artists who are often trying to fill some type of hole or prove their self-worth to the one person in the world who's never going to understand it. It's like, once I shifted my perspective, I actually became extremely grateful for social media and the power that it has to just like, it's a money-making tool. It's pretty amazing. And if you're creative and if you stay open-minded and keep networking and hustling and honing your craft, like it just, the first time in my life I'm making real money from my music. And like to get paid to do something I love is unbelievable.
Totally. I think that you need to be able to know what things to say yes to. And also know what things to say no to.
Listen, I've never collaborated with anybody. I've never done like a feature, and I've never let anybody feature on one of my tracks.
Yeah.
I'm very, very protective of my artist. I collaborate on other things, like let's organize a show together. Like I'll hire you to shoot my music video and all these things. But yeah, it's all about strategy. And for me, there's no point collaborating until I truly have something to offer and until I've truly developed my own voice as an individual artist.
There's so few collaborations musically in the modern age that feel genuine to me.
It's like a business.
Yeah. And like it's always so weird when, you get it a lot in like the pop and the hip hop R&B worlds. Occasionally you get it in the rock worlds too, but you see it the most where it's like there's like, 6 artists on a track, like some DJ Khaled shit or whatever. And it's like, this just feels like like creatively bankrupt and like
Yeah.
artistically worthless to me.
Yeah.
But for some people, they love that stuff. Obviously, it's not
Mhm.
like DJ Khaled needs my fucking advice on how to be a successful person. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's working for him, and that's fine. I think that works for a lot of people too.
That's
It's like,
his strategy.
it's like wallpaper music, you
Mhm.
know. But for me, it's like I
Mhm.
interface with art in a much different way than people that just kind of want something
Absolutely.
that's on in the background.
That's what's weird about it to me. Like, collaborating with someone on a song to me is one of the most intimate things you could ever do.
Yeah,
So when a
intimate's
stranger
word.
approaches me, whether it's on Instagram DMs or after one of my gigs, like, yo, let's collab, I'm like, I feel affronted, honestly. Like, it's not even like no shade to anybody, but it feels like a total stranger approaching you and saying, like, want to get married, want to be my girlfriend,
No.
want to make a baby. Like,
Yeah.
who are you? What?
Yeah.
Like, that would take, I literally have never worked with, no, there's a handful of people who I've been in the studio with, but those are people who I had to really develop a trusting relationship with. And that has to be earned, you know? So it's just like, that whole thing I find, I don't understand it.
No, I agree with you 100%. Especially, you know, in like in the hip hop realm, if I'm doing like any sort of solo performance, which I haven't done in quite some time, but in that time frame, it'd be very obvious, like, yo, like that was dope. We got to do something together sometime. And it's like, I know that they're coming at me from a place of just genuine, like, innocence and just wanting to network.
Yeah.
But like, I'm a fucking freak. So when you're asking me to collaborate on something, I'm like, you have no idea what you're asking me.
I'm
like,
a tyrant.
Yes. If we were going to be collaborating on something, it's going to be like, we're going to fucking like, if we're going to do this, we got to like fucking like get together, come up with a theme. We're going to be writing stuff in the room at the same time. None of this like, you have your verse, I have my verse, and we just like plop them together. It's like, no, like we're going to do this. Like
the concept has to be unified.
Yeah. Like we're going to need to be like genuinely working on this together. Because like also too, I think a lot of those people don't come from an environment of working in bands. Where like I've played in a lot of bands over the years where the intent is a collaboration between multiple people.
Yeah.
So like I'm comfortable with that process because that's how the band works. But if you're like approaching me to work on something like solo on solo, it's like, oh, okay, like we need to approach this the way a band would write a song. And it's also like, well, why are we doing this for just like one song? There's been some people I've collaborated with on like full projects. Like, okay, let's do like an EP together or something. Let's make like a bigger piece of art rather than just like one song.
Yeah.
And I do enjoy doing that, but it's still like an intense thing for me to take on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's so many different paradigms and different genres of what it means to collaborate in different cultures. And so I respect all those different approaches. But for me, where I labor over every component of my songs and they all have a theme and they're all telling a story, it just, you know, it doesn't make sense. And you know, for a long time, whenever somebody would ask me to collab, I would like basically almost copy and paste the same paragraph of being like, you know, all I have time for right now is my own artistry and I want to build up my own act to a certain point and, you know, so that I have something to offer and all this stuff. And now I just started responding, yeah, if you're ever looking for a producer, I can let you know what my rates are. And that really, really changes things. Because it's like, yeah, I would, because it'd be one thing if we were collaborating in the sense where, you know, we were both paying a producer to give us a beat and we each threw a verse on it. But I'm producing the beats from scratch. Like, that's a lot of labor. And so it's also like, if I'm going to let you do a verse on a beat that I made from scratch, like for free, and then you're like, yeah, I don't know. It just feels like if you like what I'm doing and if you like my beats, like I'd be happy to make you a beat for your music. Sure. But that will come at a price.
Yeah, totally. You know, I found that whenever I started doing solo music and releasing it, it almost felt like it was a requirement to have like features, you know? So, and I was in the same position as you where like I've never used beats that other people made. I've always produced all of my own stuff. So it was like really personal on a crazy level. And I put a lot of thought into all of my songs, like in terms of having like a consistent theme, narrative, like, you know, I always taken it very seriously.
Yeah.
But when I would reach out to people to collaborate on stuff, I'd be like, here's the theme, you know, stick to the theme. And they would, you know, come over and record the stuff because I would always be like, you're going to come to my studio. We're going to record it together.
Yeah.
And it was never like, it was never right.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I'm like new in the scene, and these are the people that I want to collaborate with because I want to be able to, like, you know, like there's people that at the time were like, you know, figureheads in the scene. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's cool that I was able to get these people to agree to come and collaborate. You know what I mean? It's like, none of us are making any money from this at the time. So they're
Yeah.
just doing me a favor.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, whatever, who cares? But then it
It's a
got to a
trade-off.
point where it was like, I care too much about my art to like have somebody else just like spit some nonsense jibber jabber on top of something that I care so much about.
Yeah.
Like I think I got to a point where it's like, I don't feel like I need these features to elevate myself anymore. And I think you get that a lot too, where newer coming up artists will like, oh, like let's put fucking 55% of our budget into getting like Drake or somebody to do, you know, on your songs. It's going to help elevate you.
Yeah.
And that's a very dramatic example for
Yeah.
me. But I'm just saying, like, I just felt like I didn't need the elevation from anybody. There was nobody that I creatively clicked with.
Yeah.
So it just got to a point where it's like, it's just going to be me. And
Yeah.
like, maybe that comes off as like egotistical or something, but it's like, it's my fucking art.
Yeah, absolutely. We have every right to be protective of our work. Again, it's how I got here today. It was by being protective. I mean, also the amount of time that producers were offering to produce for me or asking me to sing on their beats. And I was always clear, I'm working on developing my craft and my skills as a producer.
Yeah.
And if I had let other people into that process during that really kind of, vulnerable is not the right word, but during that incubation period.
You're like Play-Doh. It's like moldable.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And now I have this skill set that is worth, that I can just keep cashing in on, right? And but yeah, it's hard. Like I think about what would be the conditions for me to do a collaboration. And I am a businesswoman. I am strategic. So one thing I do keep in mind is if we're in the same scene, if we're playing in the same shows, if we know all the same people, us collaborating would feel a little bit like a circle jerk because we're not exposing each other's sounds to new audiences, right?
Fair, yeah.
So for me, it would have to be, one, we'd have to be creatively compatible, have to develop a trusting relationship. But two, we'd have to be in different scenes. It would have to be a mutually beneficial deal where it's like my audience would easily convert to your audience and vice versa. Those are, when I think about it, those are the two conditions. So I'm not completely opposed to collaborating. And, I have worked with session musicians, like Joe Lytrick is a phenomenal rhythm guitar player who's on a couple of my tracks. But, he just sends me riffs and I do with them what I please. So that's all that I've been receptive to at this stage in my career. But eventually I would consider it if the conditions were exactly right.
Totally. I mean, I think that's the fun thing about music and songwriting is that I think at its core, it functions best in like a collaborative environment. But I think that you need to be so confident in who you are as an individual before you can even attempt to write music with other people.
Because people are out here collaborating like before they've even put out a solo album or any solo projects, right? And it's like, how are you going to, this is the third time I've said this. How are you going to know what you have to offer to a collaboration until you've spent enough time alone, just crafting your own skills?
So that's the interesting...
And not only your skills, but because some people could be very skilled, but finding your own voice too.
Definitely, yeah.
Sorry,
That's okay. All good. That's the thing that's interesting about bands, right? I come from a background of bands. Like I was playing in bands before I ever tried to do any sort of solo music.
Yeah.
So...
And that's totally different.
It's a totally different thing, but a lot of it is the same. A lot of startup bands don't work because it's a room full of people that haven't found themselves. And then you deal with all of this conflicting sort of thing. And it's like everybody misses the point that we're all trying to create a common goal here. We're trying to make a good song. And it's like, but then you get like the egotistical guitar player or like the rock star singer. And it's like, all of this is important, but you got to realize that this is all coming together. You know what I mean? It's like, this is, 4, 5, 6 different voices that try to make one thing. And that might mean that like, maybe this particular piece of art isn't like 100% like your voice, but that's the point of like a collaboration. It's everybody, and being able to be comfortable with that is an insane skill set.
It's like any relationship, right? You have to know yourself and love yourself before you can really merge with someone or multiple people to create something that's greater than the sum of the parts,
Yeah. With your music now, we've talked a lot about the do's and don'ts of working with other people. Let's laser focus in on like what you've been doing personally.
Mhm.
Any recent releases, upcoming releases? What's on
Yeah.
the plate right
I
now?
actually just launched the pre-save link today for my next single.
Woo!
Yeah,
Congrats.
after like a 5-month. The last thing I put out was in January, so like a 5-month hiatus. Um yeah, I'm super psyched. There's 2 songs that I've finished on the next EP, and that I realized what the theme of the EP was just last week. So I'm gonna call the EP Addolorata, which means it's a Southern Italian woman's name that translates to suffering woman. And it really just captures this, romanticized archetype of Mother Mary, of a woman who is suffering and as that being a virtuous thing. Um, and so the first song is about my Nonna Rosa, who was my grandmother on my dad's side of the family, who I barely knew. But I went to see this psychic a couple times. Shout out to Sharan in Uniontown. Sharan's Magic Treasure Box. She's famous. Like people will fly in to see her.
Wow.
And I take everything with a grain of salt. Like I do believe that there is more than what our scientific tools can measure and more than what our senses can perceive. So I'm open to multiple layers of reality being present. And I'll tell you that every time I've gone to see her, like I lost my job once. She was like, "Don't worry, you'll get another job by February 18th." I got an offer on the 17th. I hadn't spoken to someone in a while. She said, "Oh, this person's going to reach out to you soon." The next day I get a text, like crazy stuff. But both times that I saw her, she emphasized that my grandmother was with me every step of the way with my music. She knew I was a music producer without me telling her, and I didn't give her my name in advance. She was like, and she's really old. She was like, "You know that thing? You're a musician, but you also do that thing like when you turn the knobs. Like, what is that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a music producer." Like,
Weird.
she's
That's
wild.
cool.
But she was like, "Your grandmother, she is really, really close to you because she was like you, adventurous, stubborn, ambitious, but she never had a chance to live that out."
Mhm.
She was born in southern Italy, in a small village after World War II. Her mother died in childbirth. Her father abandoned her to start a new family, and her great aunt put her on a ship to Australia to find work when she was 13. After which she was forced into an arranged marriage with my grandfather, and she tried to run away multiple times because she just hated her life. She didn't get to actualize her potential in any way. So this song is about her. And then the second song on the EP is about the disappearance of Emanuela Orlandi, who there's a documentary about her called Vatican Girl that I highly recommend. But in the 80s, she disappeared from the Vatican in Rome. I was born in Rome for context. And also for context, since we last spoke, I started putting out music in Itanglish, Italian and English. And that has just unlocked, I feel like I've unlocked my true voice now that I'm combining those two sides of my story. But yeah, so I'm writing a song about her disappearance. It's never been solved, but every lead ultimately leads to the fact that the Vatican and the Roman mafia collaborated to cover up whatever it was that happened. So, it wasn't intentional, but I'm like, there's a theme here of the suffering Italian woman under the oppressive kind of and beautiful forces of Catholicism in Italy. So that's the direction that I'm heading. And now I need at least one more song about a suffering woman. So if anyone has any stories or ideas, hit me up on Instagram, Princess Nostalgia. But I'm sure it will come.
I definitely think that it will come to you in time.
Mm-hmm.
You can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the thing that's so interesting, and I'm glad to hear that you have found this new voice for yourself and you're finding things to be inspired by and create art with. I find that I've struggled a bit, not with making music, but lyrically over the past like 5 years of my life, because like I've finally gotten to a point where I'm kind of getting my shit together here. I've like, I'm like working hard, making decent money, have a decent house, decent friends, decent social circle, relationship, quit drinking, quit, all this stuff, right?
Nice.
And it's like, what the fuck do I write about?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I'm in like a very admittedly privileged position of having like a good, easygoing life right now. I'm just like, you know, DJing shows, playing with the band, recording podcasts with friends, you know, but like my art is dark. It's always been dark. It's always come from like, you know, broken home, crazy, growing up around fucking drug addict type shit. But I'm past that. Great. But what do I do now?
You can still tap into that.
I have to find the other like stories of other people to tell and share.
Absolutely. You know, I think that I remember hearing an interview with Andre 3000 because, you know, he hadn't put out music in so long, and now he put out this flute album.
Yeah.
And in an interview, he was like, what do I have to rap about? Like, I'm just like an old man. Like, I have like a colonoscopy next week. Like, what am I? And when I heard that, I was like, I honestly disagree. Like, I really disagree. I feel like there's always something to say. Like, being human is so much just because you're in a healthy place. Like, I think in any art form, kind of the darkness and like the fact that artists must be suffering and so fucked up inside, like, is necessary for them to make their art. And I do think I do think that artists are highly sensitive beings, and that's why so many of them struggle with addiction and so many leave this world too soon. All of that is true. But learning how to take care of yourself and learning how to honor that extreme sensitivity and be healthy, to me, will just enable you to get even better at your art. Like, and you can always feel those feelings, that inner child and all those experiences you've had are still in there. But I personally don't really write about my personal, I mean, they're in there, but I don't like to get too literal with my personal struggles or relationships. To me, that has never felt natural to like write a love song, like, but it's, or like any type of, I would rather channel my feelings and my experiences through telling stories that are bigger than myself, I think.
Totally. I think that it goes back to the beginning of our conversation and talking about the advances in technology and how there's always some new plugin or new piece of equipment. And like, you're always trying to like, once you get comfortable doing something, you realize that there's a different way to do it. Or like maybe what you're doing is outdated. And I'm kind of feeling that way, but about like my personality. It's like I've gotten so used to making art, tapping into one side of myself, that now I need to kind of like relearn how to like, like where am I pulling this art from?
Yeah, it's like when Tyler the Creator put out his Flower Boy, I think it was called Flower Boy album.
Okay, yeah.
It was like when he was getting all soft and like came out as being bi and all these things. I personally still prefer early Tyler when he was like angry and like really, really crass and like, but yeah, it's interesting to go through that. Like, what is relevant to me now that I've gone through this major shift?
Totally. It's like, you know, I'm in a fortunate position now where like the biggest project that I'm working on is with my band Normal Creatures, and like these are songs that we've been working on. This whole album, I've been working on it since 2020. And it's like, like, I mean, I've never like labored over something this intensely in my life. And like I wrote most of those songs in 2020 lyrically. So
do you feel like over it sometimes?
No, not over it. I'm like, I feel really good about that stuff. And like, I was definitely not in a great place in that time frame. A lot of people weren't. The world was kind of wild. You know, and I was like, basically like, you know, at the core of that album, it's a lot about like me, you know, realizing like that I kind of that I'm not the person that I was. And like the whole album is about like changing and realizing that you're changing, you know, like I was in a really unhealthy relationship. Things with my personal life were kind of just crazy and just like navigating through that. And I got through it great. And I'm glad I have all these great songs. But, you know, as things go, it's not like I haven't stopped writing. It's like this material is the album and we're crafting that. But I continue to work on other things outside of that. And now that I've flushed all of that out of my system, I have found since then, it's harder for me to write about because I don't want to keep writing about that. But I continue to write songs. You know, I got the bands making songs and stuff like that. And it's like, the fuck am I going to write about?
Yeah, it's almost like going back to the same theme of not getting too comfortable doing things a certain way. Like, I wonder if for me, you know, because some people approach the songwriting process with a pen and paper of like, this is the story I'm going to tell. And for me, it's almost never been that way. For me, it starts with a beat. Then it starts with syllables and a melody. And then I just have to figure out the words that fit in.
Exactly the same as you. Exactly.
And then the story. And then I'm like, okay, I guess this is what it's about. Because one word will come that sounds perfect. I just like the way it sounds there. And then I try to build a sentence around that word. Then I try to come up with the next phrase that'll rhyme with it. And at that point, I have to also come up with a phrase that not only rhymes, but somehow relates. And then next thing you know, the song is telling me what it's about.
Yeah.
And I'm filling it with emotion. I'm filling it with the feeling that the song gives me. But it was never about, I'm going to tell this story. Occasionally, like the song about the disappearance of Emanuela Orlandi is an exception because I watched the documentary and it was just in my mind. And then this melody came, the Roman mafia at the time was called Banda de la Magliana. To me, I was like, that's the fucking coolest name ever. So I just started humming Banda de la Magliana. And I was like, okay, I have to write a song about this, but
Sure.
But yeah, they just fall into place based on what the melody requires, and for the most part.
Yeah.
But I feel like eventually that method might get tired for me, and maybe one day I will write down, with pen and paper, think about what story I want to tell. But kind of the order that you do things can affect the writing process, and so maybe if you feel like you don't know what you have to say, maybe not even worrying about what you're trying to say, and then see where it goes could help.
Totally. I find that my approach to songwriting is very similar to yours most of the time. Being a producer and being somebody that comes from like a rock background, for me, the music has always been the main focus. It's like, I need a strong song. Nothing else matters.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting because in a lot of hip hop, especially modern hip hop, nothing against modern hip hop, but it is like the music doesn't really matter. It is a lot of just kind of like word salad vocally. This is just about this, the beat is just like the wallpaper, but I've never approached music from that standpoint.
Yeah.
And going back to the collaborating thing, that's what makes it hard. Cause like when I've sat down with other people, it's like, here's the beat and here's, kind of what I'm thinking. And I'm starting to write stuff that's like in cadence with the drums and like thinking about all this stuff. And then somebody else is like, oh, like I got this thing that like I just kind of wrote like 6 months ago that might fit with this. And it's like, motherfucker.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yep.
That's not how this works.
No, and it works for different paradigms, but exactly, that's how I feel too. It's like every element in my songs is responding to the other parts, and it's a feedback loop, and there needs to be space for each element. It's not like just adding something on top.
Yeah. I find that when it comes to songwriting, I have the easiest time like lyrically. And I have to stop myself from this, but like being silly. So I'm kind of a silly little guy, and like, but the ego in me like refuses to allow myself to write silly music.
That's what you got to do next,
and I don't know what that is. I don't know why.
Yeah,
it's not like I have some desperate need to be taken seriously as an art. I'm not like that kind. I mean, like, sure, I want people to like understand and respect me for the time that I put into my work, but I don't need to be like held on this pedestal of being like, a dark brooding artiste, right? But yeah, like I always like, I think it's because like I don't know, like if I wanted to like just write something like really, really goofy, I could do it really, really easily.
Yeah.
I think that like I struggle in trying to keep myself in some sort of like I don't know, just not letting things be too silly. I don't know how to word it other than that.
Yeah.
But what's silly to me might not even be silly to somebody else.
Absolutely.
There's probably different thresholds of silliness.
Yeah. And silly can be, I heard this quote that is something along the lines of, art can be highbrow or lowbrow, but there's nothing worse than middlebrow.
Oh,
so if something's like really dumb, it's like almost like genius. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Slapstick comedy, or like, I don't know, I'm watching the show True Blood right now, and I'm obsessed, and it's like, it's the best mix of highbrow and lowbrow.
Sure.
But stuff that's like trying to be smart, but it's still kind of generic, and like, that's the type of thing that can appeal to everyone, supposedly. Like a lot of mainstream music is middlebrow. But like, I think being silly and dumb can actually be extremely profound. Like, if you're intentional about how you do it, and maybe you don't even have to, I mean, you will be intentional, because sometimes being intentional is giving yourself space to play without a clear end goal. And then something comes out that you can retroactively ascribe meaning to. But yeah, I say give yourself full permission to be lowbrow.
Totally. There was like, all of like the this stupid like discussion around the time that like WAP came out.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, this song is a work of art. It's hysterical.
Yeah.
Like, people taking it so seriously and things like that. It's like, we all grew up in the same time frame, right? Like, this isn't anything new in terms of raunchiness. There's been plenty of other artists that have done this.
Absolutely.
Come on. The macaroni in a pot line, it's fucking genius.
Well, that's the thing. Like,
I can't make macaroni and cheese now without thinking
same. Honestly, same.
It's so funny.
Yeah, that's one of the most legendary lines. No, I agree. Like, well, that's the thing with satire, right? Because there's always going to be dumb people who interpret satire as if they're being literal.
Yeah.
And let them, because that honestly makes it that much funnier for those of us who are like, in the know or whatever.
Totally. And there's almost like this like sort of like punk rock middle finger aesthetic to WAP that just like makes me really like respect that like and, fuck you, we're taking control of our sexuality, our narratives, and we're just having fun. Like for anybody to like literally try to dissect and analyze like the lyrics of WAP with any sort of like serious intent is like, bro, you're the joke.
Exactly. I feel like the feminism of WAP isn't the fact that they're bragging about XYZ. Like, that's besides the point. It's the fact that they're fucking around and making money off of it.
Oh, yeah.
That's, that's the thing that I can get behind, honestly, like unequivocally. But yeah, the amount of time that went into being like, is this actually empowering or not? It's just like, that's a whole other rabbit hole, like on a spiritual level that's a whole other question. But like, they have every right to cash in on all that bullshit. You know what I mean?
Totally. I don't know if my silliness will ever equal anything close to a WAP, nor would I, ever try. Yeah, definitely. But I've like found, especially like coming up in like the hip hop world, I think it was like interesting just trying so hard to not be compared to like another white guy rapper, which is, I get it. You know what I mean? Like I'm stepping into this world a little bit out of my element, and I need to be understanding and respectful of the culture and all these different things, because it's like, I grew up listening to this stuff. I mean, you mentioned like Timbaland, Missy Elliott, like that stuff, primarily like the Timbaland, Aaliyah stuff is what made me want to make beats, and like, it's like, I'm stepping into this with like nothing but like love and respect, but it's so easy because I come from like a rock background when I'm starting to be like, oh, like, yeah, you remind me of Fred Durst. Like, oh yeah, you remind me of Rage Against the Machine. It's like, yeah, I listened to that stuff when I was a kid. It's cool. But like, you don't just throw that at me. And I think there was a part of me when I was younger that was trying so hard to step away from that, especially like the Fred Durst, Limp Bizkit stuff, where it's like, that's why I'm afraid of being a little silly. Because I don't want people to be like, oh, you're one of those guys, or like you're an Eminem, which I mean, technically is like a far superior MC when he wants to be, but is also just like a fucking ding dong in a lot of ways.
He fell off a minute ago.
Yeah,
but his early stuff was like the real Slim Shady was one of my favorite songs growing up.
Oh, totally. That was he let the ego get the best of him for sure.
Yeah, and then he just became corny at some point. I don't know when that happened, but like, yeah, he became super corny. But yeah, I think, the whole thing of people comparing you to somebody who superficially is like you, but actually isn't, like, let them. Because those are the people who aren't paying close attention, who don't really care, don't understand. They're just trying to show that they paid enough attention to, sometimes people will like, sometimes if somebody sends me a song that doesn't really speak to me, but I want to show that I listened to it and that I gave it enough attention to say something, I'll be like, oh yeah, it reminds me of such and such. And it's like the Spotify algorithm. It's constantly suggesting things to me that I, on the surface, are similar to stuff I like, but it's missing that core. It's missing that whatever spirit it is that really speaks to me. And as somebody who, both of us work in so many genres, like, I don't feel like it's accurate to compare me to any specific, like, the more you find yourself, the more you can't be compared to anybody, right? But people are viewing your work and approaching it from their own reference points.
Yeah,
that's going to happen.
That's something that I took it the wrong way when I was younger, just because I didn't have like any understanding or like empathy for the lens that other people are viewing your art through. That was me being like, oh, like, I'm in this world 24/7, so I assume everyone else is, and other people are going to understand where I'm coming from. And it's like, no, it's like, that's just Jeff. Jeff listens to the radio. Jeff is here because, this guy that he works with is also playing the show.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like
Exactly.
all he knows about music in general is probably very surface level. So if
Exactly.
he's coming up with positivity and be like, oh yeah, that was cool, it reminds me of Limp Bizkit, I just need to be like, thanks, bro,
Yep.
and move on.
Exactly.
You
Yep.
know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've had that too, like throughout. People have often compared me to artists that don't speak to me, but I'm like, I can see because of people get sidetracked by the aesthetic sometimes more so than the underlying core
fair.
of what an artist is about. And yeah, I can relate.
I've had this question. I wonder if you've ever asked yourself this, right? Where I don't make music for anybody or any demographic or community specifically, right? I make music for me and whoever it resonates with, it resonates with. But I've found myself sometimes having those conversations with people post show or getting asked to play certain shows.
Mm-hmm.
And while I don't make music for a particular demographic at all, there's definitely some demographics that I might not want to be associated with.
Mm-hmm.
But I have found that for whatever reason, my music is resonating in those demographics.
Of course.
And it's like, what happened?
Of course.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm glad that people like my art.
Yeah.
But I never thought in a million years I would be playing a show with like a bunch of like Juggalo adjacent type bands.
That's so
And it's like,
funny.
and everybody's so nice.
Yeah.
And like, I'm glad and I'm thankful to be here and I'm thankful to
Yeah.
have the opportunity to
Yeah.
share my work with people. But it's like, that was not on my bingo card.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so weird. It's like, what is it about my work that resonates with these people that I never thought it would? And then on the flip, there's like always people where it's like, oh, I think I would fit in really well with these artists.
Yeah.
And then I play shows with those artists and I feel like such an outcast. It's
Yeah.
like, how did this happen?
Yep.
It's like, how do I feel like an outcast from what I thought was my community?
Yep. Well, we're not the most clear and objective judges of our own work.
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
And part of the artist's plight is that you can't control what's going to resonate, how it's going to resonate, or who it's going to resonate with. And it reminds me of Arthur Conan Doyle. I'm pretty sure he died bitter because he was so famous for writing Sherlock Holmes. Because he wrote that just to make an extra buck on the side. Like, he was this really pretentious, I think more of an academic type who wrote all this, again, pretentious drivel that nobody wanted to read. And then he casually writes when he's not trying. He writes this series that is like considered like genius. And he couldn't accept the fact that it wasn't the thing that he thought he was good at, that he was known for. And so I think just surrendering to the fact that once it's out there, it's beyond our control is something that we have to get comfortable with. But that's so funny to me. Like, it's exactly what we deserve to like have these grandiose ideas of like where we belong and who's gonna love us, and then it's like the exact people who you didn't want to be in your like fan base or like the most like interested. Like, I love that.
I think that maybe a part of it is where if I try to step outside of myself and I think about like when I'm looking for art, the art that tends to interest me the most is the stuff that I'm not expecting to engage with on that day.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that maybe it could just be a situation where if I'm playing a show with a bunch of other artists that are kind of somewhat similar to what I'm doing, it may not stand out as much.
Yes.
And also people in those demographics, you know, everybody seems to be always looking for something new. So like they're not kind of tend to be like impressed, or it might not resonate with them as much as maybe being like the outcast on a different show where it's like, oh, this is something different. This is a breath of fresh air. Absolutely.
It reminds me of this quote I heard in like a relationship advice context where this woman said, I would rather be the exception than the type. And I feel like people who listen to artists because like, yeah, I like this genre, so I just listen to other artists who are in this genre. It's like, it's a less engaged form of fandom, honestly, than people who, like, I pick artists on an artist by artist basis. Like, I listen to every genre under the sun. And there could be an artist that's very similar, but they don't appeal to me for whatever reason. And so, you know, I had a professor once who was like in his like 60s or 70s, and he discovered my music in college and was like, you know, I really like it. I hope that doesn't offend you because I know I'm not like your target audience. Like, I'm just this old nerd. And I was actually like, no, that's awesome. Like, I think it's actually it's an honor to have your music speak to people of many different walks of life. And yeah, so I agree. Like, I think I'd much rather be the exception than the type.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, you know. Now I'm catching myself doing this again, and I'm trying to be really, really cognizant of this because, like, with again normal creatures, we're finally recording this fucking record that we've been working on forever. You know what I mean? Like studio time's booked.
Mm,
I've made the decision to work with another producer and engineer to help me record this.
nice.
Mostly because I know that if I let it be too personal and if I do everything, the art's gonna suffer.
Delegating is key. And like once you've learned how to do something yourself, then you
Yeah.
can be a master delegator.
And this is somebody that I have worked with in the past with different projects. I trust them. I trust their input.
Yeah.
The collaboration, as I guess we could say, like it's there. The
Yeah.
work we've built that trust with each other. So I'm really stoked on it. But the point in regards to being on topic with fitting in with people, where it's like we're not it's like I'm like already catching myself being like, I don't want to play with these kinds of bands. I want to play with these types of bands. And I need to just be like, Brian, stop it. If there's an opportunity that feels good, take it.
Yeah.
Because you never know what's going to work and what's not
never
going to
know.
work.
Yeah.
But there's still always like, I don't know. Maybe I trust myself to some degree with some of these
Some things you have to
opportunities.
say no to.
Yes. You gotta know when to say yes. Gotta know when to say no.
Because I used to do every show. Like I used to say yes to everything, which you should when you're just starting out. That's when you're doing open mic nights, when you're just playing to a half empty room. Like do it. It's practice. It's a chance to meet people.
That's how
I've
you
reached a
find
point
out
now-
what works and what doesn't.
Exactly. But I've reached a point now where I'm like, if the sound system's not to a certain level, no. I scope out a venue before I agree, right? If it's the same community that I played to a month ago, no. Because I'm not going to be able, if I can't sell a certain number of tickets, it's not worth my time. And now that I have more live components, I have to bring a bunch of gear over. Like if the set is only 10 minutes, no, I'm doing a minimum of 30 minutes. I have to have, not played in this particular scene for at least like 3 months. And now I make sure that each of my shows is moving the needle forward in some way. Otherwise, I would rather just practice at home.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there is a somewhat, how do you phrase this? I'm trying to think of some clever way to phrase this, but I notice a lot of bands that get really comfy, or artists where, it's like, oh, this band is playing a show and it's like the same fucking lineup again and again and
at the
again.
same venue.
Yeah. And like,
again
it's
and
really
again.
easy. I understand that it's like comfortable and like this
Yeah.
works for you. I
And
guess.
it's cool if you're doing this for fun, like
Yeah,
by all
but, like,
means, but
I feel like if you just want to like hang out with your homies, it's like just leave the gear at home and like
yeah.
go putt or something. I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Like there's other ways than like having like the term that was used earlier, circle jerk,
Mm-hmm.
of
Mhm.
like,
Yep.
here's the same set that we did last month. Let's do it
Yeah.
again.
I feel like a key.
It like diminishes your work or like
exactly.
your relevance if like you just like offer too much, because it gets to a
Yes,
point where
yes.
people are like, oh, I'm not gonna go this time, but I know they're gonna play next
Exactly.
month. I'll go next time.
Make yourself scarce. People will value you more if you make yourself scarce. 48 laws of power. But yeah, I feel like a important kind of. Oh, I lost my train of thought. It'll come to me. Did you have anything you're thinking?
Well, in terms of just figuring out like,
Oh, I realized.
woo, let's go.
An important realization that I had on my journey as a entrepreneur and especially was realizing that my target audience is not my peers. Because other musicians are not the people, they're good collaborators. We should collaborate on events. We should maybe collaborate on songs if the conditions are right. But fellow artists, we're not really fans, like it's not somebody who's going to support you with no strings attached. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a lot more complicated, and it's not. And when you're playing to the same scene all the time, and when it's just other artists in the audience at every show, it's like we're not reaching anybody. We're not reaching anybody outside of, and we're not each other's target audience. And that's also why we shouldn't be competing, because we're not competition. Like we have different target audiences. Like we have all the tools to reach them online. They're not the people that are like at every show every weekend.
Yeah. There's an interesting dilemma of the real world and then the online world. And I've been like talking about this and thinking about this a lot, where it's so easy. I mean, obviously online and the real world come together, but I think that as artists, at least for me, I need to view them in two completely different ways. Because for the most part, the only way I'm going to get people out to shows, at least in the Pittsburgh area, is by interacting with other people in the Pittsburgh area in real life and networking in real life.
Yeah.
Online, I think, is great for spreading outside of the city.
Yeah.
But like most of the people that interact with my art online never fucking come to shows.
Yeah.
They interact with it all. Okay. It's like, okay, so you're a different type of fan than somebody that's going to go to the shows.
Yeah.
So it's like, but it's so easy to be like, oh, I like promoted this show online and a bunch of people liked it and shared it around. And it's like,
and then
those are just online people.
Yeah.
They're not the real world people.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if you want to interact with people in the real world, it's like, go out to some other shows if you have the time. Tell people about the shows and just like be a part of that community, and it's going to help build so much more. I mean, a lot of time, like I can go out to a show, see some other artists. Maybe I'll see somebody I hadn't seen in a while, find out about some new artists. And I'm like, oh, cool, that band's dope. I got to get them on the podcast. Talk to a bunch of people, wheel and deal a bit. And I could get so much more productively done going to a show that I didn't even fucking play.
Yeah.
But still just, you know, networking, talking to people than I ever would if I like sat down online and tried to, you know, waste time with some sort of marketing thing.
Absolutely.
There's so much power in just like going out and meeting people, shaking hands, not in like a weird, you know, businessy way, but in a little bit of a weird businessy way.
As a businesswoman, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, a lot of artists are ashamed to admit that they're marketing themselves, but for me, it's like, and there is a lot of shame, especially as a solo artist. There's a lot of shame in the relentless self promotion that we have to engage in. But I've done a lot of work to release that shame, and I feel more ready than ever to be like, yeah, I'm a fucking businesswoman. Yes, I run ads online. Yeah, I save my money to run ads because that's how I can reach new people, and I'm seeing a return on the investment. Like that is what like most of the artists who are succeeding now independently, it's because they're approaching it as a business. They're investing money in their business. They're forming an LLC. Like there's nothing wrong with any of that. Yeah. If you want it to be your hobby, by all means, that's an honorable pursuit. But if you want it to be a business and if you want to make money off of it and if you want to reach new people, you got to invest in your business. Plain and simple.
Totally.
And you have to network. And there's nothing sleazy about that. It depends on how you do it. But if you're an honest person and you're creating opportunities that are mutually beneficial, I think that's great.
Yeah. Hell yeah. So as we are coming around the mountain here, we've hit an hour. I could probably easily talk to you for another hour, but I don't know how much our listeners, they probably have other things to do.
I understand.
They got shows to go to. They got wheeling and dealing to do of their own.
Absolutely. Yep. As they should.
So before we let everyone go about their productive days, is there anything that you would like to share with the people? You want to drop any, where can we find you, types of things, any upcoming events, any of that?
I'll be playing like 4 or 5 shows in New York City this summer. So check me out on Instagram to find those dates. But one of the main things I'm pushing now is, and speaking of kind of the divide between online people and real life people, I found this middle ground, which is Discord. And I'm realizing that my target audience are Discord nerds. Because like I'm a nerd, like I love talking about philosophy, history, all these things are weaved into my songs. And then I have this evil AI alter ego named Uncanny Sally. She's a real bitch, and she runs the Discord server, and she just insults the members of the servers. We go back, and there's like different threads. There's a music production tips thread. There's a comedy thread. There's an existential musings thread where people share things from the notes section of their iPhone. Basically, Uncanny Sally is conducting research on humankind so that she can exploit that information for her inevitable world domination. And so the Discord server is the place where she conducts research on human beings. And we have like about 50 members now since I started it a couple months ago. And that is kind of the home of like the people who are the most engaged and like part of this community that I'm building and who get it. And these are people who are telling me like, come to this city. Like it's people who will transfer to a different type of bond outside of like kind of the lackadaisical energy of Instagram. So that's like the number one thing that I've been pushing is like, if you really want to follow what I'm doing, if you want to be part of this community where we have all kinds of weird conversations and we have a music recommendations thread and there's people recommending stuff from all kinds of different angles and genres. But if you want to join, it's at the link in my bio on Instagram and then on TikTok, I publish a lot of music production tips specifically. So yeah, those are the main things that I'm pushing these days.
That's awesome. That's really fun to hear about the Discord thing.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I had started like a podcast Discord type of thing during the world shutdown sort of situation. But then for me personally, I found that once things were open up and we were able to go back out into the real world, I like found myself stepping away from so much of like the online stuff personally, just not for me.
Different strokes for different folks.
I know there's a great fucking tool there, and I probably should do it. I need help. I need delegation. I need people to help me with stuff. Doing so much stuff yourself is like insane. Yeah. I can get it done, but I'm also not sleeping. Yeah. And it's bad.
Yep. You have to really focus on what works for you. And like, you're more of like, you like to hustle in these live settings. You play live a lot more than me. Like for me, it feels more natural to be a little bit more online in certain ways.
Totally.
Like I get very, very drained by going to shows and stuff and just being in like crowded, loud environments. So like for me, this is natural. For me, it's where my ideal fan exists. But for you, it's a different strat. Like, it's just depends.
Definitely.
Different priorities.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for taking the time to come by and chat today. It was great. It's been fun over the years to see you like continue to grow and build and do your stuff. I was
like a baby when we first talked.
I'm always like lurking in the shadows, always observing and viewing. So it's really, really cool to have you back on the show now, like all these years later. Yeah. And to just see the growth. It's awesome.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Of course. Thank you. And congrats on everything and your continued success.
I'm excited to hear your album when it comes out.
And your journey. Oh, yes. Who knows when that'll be? Hopefully not another year from now.
Before you die.
But yeah, before I die, whenever that may be. So I guess with all of that being said, that is all, folks. Thanks so much for being here. One more time, Princess Nostalgia. Woo! I'll be back again next week with another episode. Same time, same place, same channel. You know the drill. Brian Sykes Howe, start the beat. 2024. Take care of yourselves. Take care of the people around you. Peace. We did it. That was a podcast.
Hell
yes.
Yeah.
Fuck
that
yeah.
was a lot of fun.
That was great.